Okay, so I got a 2007 Dodge Calibre. This one's turning out to be weird. I thought it was going to be pretty straightforward. You turn the key, and sometimes you hold the key for a while, sometimes you hold it for only a couple seconds, sometimes it starts right away, sometimes it doesn't start at all. And it just doesn't respond, no click, nothing. Well, I assumed it's these style starters that they don't have a ring terminal for the solenoid wire. It's just a push on, and those little connections, they get really crappy and the terminals get spread. So that's what I assumed. It's a bit of a nasty spot to get to. Usually you just pull it out, you just tighten up the little blade connector a little bit, and then put it back on, everything's good. But since it's so ugly to get to, I figured I'd run a test light. One side of that test light is hooked up to the solenoid wire really close to the starter. The other side's hooked up to ground. And what I was expecting to see is that test light would be lit, saying that the wire is good, but just the connection to the starter is really bad. And that would be lit, and then waiting for it to start. And then finally it jostles a little bit, and then it starts. That's what I was assuming. But when it wasn't starting, the thing wasn't lit. So here's the weird thing. This light here in the center, that's the security telltale. Right now, if we look at it, hopefully the glare's not too bad. It says valid key in ignition, no. Right now I'm in the wireless module, which is kind of the catch-all for these early Dodges. Does the security stuff as well. So it says we're in the run position. It says valid key in ignition, no. The most recent RKE remote keyless entry inhibit. Key in ignition, all features inhibited. Well, it's a remote keyless entry. We can kind of ignore that one. But this one here, the NGC/SKIM status, engine kill command. Valid Sentry key, Immobilizer, module key says false. And then indicator lamp status is lamp on. So what this was saying before, when I first got in here, which is kind of weird when I noticed that that wasn't lighting, valid key said yes. This NGC/SKIM status did say engine kill command. Valid Sentry key also said true, and then indicator lamp status said off. So it was indicating that it was a good key, but the SKIM still said engine kill command, and it wasn't even attempting to start. Now, oh yeah, also that security light was not on. Now it is on, and now we have it all saying that's an invalid key. Now it's doing a start stall. Let's turn that off. Okay, so now it's not starting. So it says valid key in ignition, yes. It says true for valid Sentry key, and it says lamp off, which indeed the lamp is off. And it says we're in the start position. That's interesting. Let's try it again. Okay, I'm off, as you can see up top. Okay, that time it started. Okay, so I'll go back through with editing, and hopefully my phone captured one of those, a few of those frames. We could tell for sure what all it said. Of course, the test light was lit when it did that. See if we can get kind of both. Might be a little hard to. All right, let's try it again. All right, so I didn't catch that live, but editing, hopefully that'll show something interesting, because it didn't work for the first bit, but then it started. Okay, so hopefully that clip kind of shows kind of what happened in a little bit better detail. I wanted to do a slow-mo recap of it. I started the clip kind of as soon as I heard the click of me turning it to the start position, and went through frame by frame, slowed it down 4 times, and I saw there was a full second between when I turned the key to start and when this test light lit up. Then a little while after that, the scan tool then switched to the start position from lock. there's always going to be a little bit of a delay. Something like a test light's always going to light up faster than a scan tool is going to actually show that you're in start position. That's kind of normal. There's a little bit of a delay. You don't really know how much of a delay, and you also don't know if that thing has a constant delay. I had another time with this vehicle. This will be actually coming up pretty soon in the video. I don't know how well you'll be able to see it, but I had another time where I went to start it, and there was almost a full second between when this test light lit up and when that scan tool actually showed that I was in the start position. Whereas other times it was pretty quick. You know, a test light would light, go to full brightness, and then just a frame or two later, the scan tool would show you're in start position. So does that mean anything? I don't know. That might just be a scan tool. Sometimes maybe it's reacting quicker than others. Who knows? We're not going to get sidetracked with that. We're just, you know, not even really keeping the back of the mind very much. Now, the one thing that's weird is with this vehicle, when it came in, it had 3 complaints that were seemingly not exactly the same thing. Complaint number 1, sometimes you turn the key, nothing. Complaint number 2, sometimes you turn the key, you hold it, and a second, maybe 2 seconds, maybe 3 seconds, maybe half a second, but some determined amount of time that changed, then it would start. Complaint number 3 is you turn the key, it would start normally, and then it would stall. So they all kind of seem a little different. Potentially, especially the one where there's the delay, you turn the key, you wait a little bit of time, and then it starts. That could potentially be more like an ignition switch. These vehicles, they do have, it is a digital style ignition switch where instead of all the power going through the ignition switch in different legs, there's different circuits to the ignition switch that just, you know, have resistors and send an input to the body control module and the various other things. So it is possible that, you know, the ignition switch itself is kind of going faulty. You know, start stall, typically that's security, you know, especially with, we're getting all these codes about the invalid key, all this sort of business. But with everything that's going on, you know, we don't want to get sidetracked. We don't want to kind of get too overwhelmed by chasing everything. We just pick with whatever is the easiest to test. And you know what? Hey, if you can find a common denominator that can take care of everything, that's great. But otherwise, you just find whatever is the easiest to test, and you just follow that path, and you stay on that path until you get that accomplished and fixed. Now, if it turns out some of the other stuff is or as a result of other things, then you can address those individually. But you try not to do everything at once, because then you just kind of go from thing to thing to thing to thing to thing, and you don't really get anywhere. So we are setting codes for the key. We're just going to continue on that path, and you know what? If the delayed start, if that turns out to be something different, we'll address that along the way. So let's get back to the video, and we'll carry on. Try it again. Okay, and it is interesting to note that when it's off, shut off that dinger, it does say normal now, it doesn't say kill. So where do we go from here? Let's go back, let's go read codes, see if there's anything in here now. Okay, invalid key, Sentry key, Immobilizer module. That's a new one, that wasn't there before. The invalid key was there before. Kind of almost makes me, now that I know of, I don't know if the customer has another key. We do see that this isn't a factory key, it is an aftermarket key. So it'd be really nice if we had another key to work with so we could rule that out. If we don't, I'm thinking that the best way forward, just because it keeps throwing that invalid key, that was, we go back to that What's the code number? Bravo 1 Alpha 25. It's the code number for invalid key. It was throwing that before, and oh, yeah, that helps if we put that in the on position. So that's one of the reasons why, if I'm looking at security stuff, I like looking at things like body control modules and wireless control modules, because a lot of times they can be active with the key off, whereas the engine, you know, if you try looking at engine data, you shut the vehicle off, you lose your data. So let's see what's in engine now. Invalid Immobilizer, yeah, invalid key. That's what was there before. So if we go, one of the things I hate about the Autels is I wish they had better ways of organizing saved data and vehicle history, but they don't, but whatever. So this is what was there the first time around. We had 3 in the powertrain control module and 3 in the wireless control module / TPMS. So then we had an oxygen sensor, slow response, don't care about that. Cat inefficiency, we don't care about that. And then there's the 513, the invalid key, and remote keyless entry, fob 1 performance, and then also invalid key. So, you know, it sure would be nice if I could catch it where it would start stalling again when the light was staying on. Just for grins and giggles, let's see if we can't go back to that, see if we can't catch it again. But what I'm thinking right now, it's weird that it does the 2 different things. It's weird that sometimes it's a start stall, sometimes it's just a no crank. I don't really like that. I don't like that when it's not starting. I don't like that that screen says inhibit, but there's no telltale on. I don't like that. But what I'm thinking, before we go wild goose chasing, the thing to make sense is get another key. Hopefully he's got another key. Otherwise, we'll have to get one made up from the VIN. But yeah, rather than digging maybes, let's try another key, because, you know, I have had times where a bad key has done kind of 2 different things. It's weird, you wouldn't think it, but you know, on these, that one there was a Jeep, it was a Patriot, which I think are very similar to these Calibres. I think it was even the same engine. But either way, rather than going down a wild goose chase, we're going to try and get a new key. Hopefully he's got a different key, and then see if it still does it. Otherwise, we could be looking at an ignition switch issue. But I think on these, am I back into wireless control module? I don't know. I'm pretty sure on these, I don't think they have multiple contacts. So old school ignition switches, you know, you'd have one contact that would run, you know, say just the starter, relay, then another contact to run the computers and all these other things. I think on this it's just a digital ignition switch that just runs through different resistors. But let's go back to here. Let's go back to here. Hopefully I can get this a little closer. I might be having to go back to get back to work mode soon, but hopefully I can. Okay, we want that. So engine run command. Let's just get that one too. Let's get that one. And no, that's tire indicator lamp. Okay, let's see if we can catch another start stall. Okay, so pull the key out, flip it around, and try it again. Flip it again. Flip it again. It's not wanting to do it. Well, I don't know if I'll be able to get it backed up again, especially doing a start stall. But really, in a case like this, yeah, we got to get another key. What else can you do? Well, we could look up the wiring diagram for how the ignition switch goes off. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that the ignition switch in there is much kind of like a blower motor resistor pack. Similar kind of concept, where all it does is it steps it through different resistors, so it just, instead of powering something, it's just a signal voltage, and it just, each position there just drops it down to a different voltage level, and that becomes an input to, say, the body control module or whatever that does all the actual functions. So these newer vehicles, they don't have multiple contacts, so ignition switches typically it either fails completely or doesn't. If that makes sense. So I don't think it's an ignition switch issue. Okay, well, I think that's about all we can do in here. So let's pull up, I'll pull up a wiring diagram, kind of go through that a little bit, but really we're just going to get a different key and see what happens from that. Okay, so in this vehicle the key did fix the problem, but what happens if the key wasn't the whole problem? In cases like that, usually what I'll do is I just pull up the wiring diagrams. I find that they give me a good overall picture of the system without wading through a whole bunch of flow charts and all that. That's what I start with. So we'll pull up the starting circuit diagram, and we see the TIPM at the top. Here's the yellow wire that we were on, the starter control out. If we follow that down, that goes directly to the starter solenoid, and we don't have to worry about anything else on the starter, because the only times we're having issues is when this yellow wire was not active. So you know what, if we had power on that yellow wire and it still wasn't starting, then sure, we'd want to look at the main power, we'd want to make sure it's case grounded, all that business. But since our only times we had issues was when there was no power on this yellow wire, we can ignore the starter for now, and we're just dealing with this supply. So yes, we could have an issue with the TIPM. However, we didn't have any codes with the TIPM. We did have security related codes. So we're kind of more focusing on this side of the circuit. We see down here there's the ignition switch, which has some contacts, and we follow this. This will be a ground on this side, and we see the resistors. So that means this is just a data input that follows over to our Sentry module. Now, if we look at this, the dashed line, that means that's an incomplete picture of the component. Whereas if we look at the starter here, it's a solid line. That means that's the whole component. So that's all the wires. So this goes to the Sentry module. We don't see any splices coming off of that, and it's incredibly unlikely for a Sentry module to be a gateway. The TIPM is the gateway on these vehicles. So that makes me believe that this circuit right here is solely for the Sentry module. So we could theoretically have an issue of this part of the ignition switch without affecting the rest of the vehicle. So we'll go back and take a peek to see if that is the case. Diagrams, non-OE. I always like to use non-OE until I need to use OE. I just find it's better to get the overall picture. So power distribution, and we just go down until we find the ignition switch. And here we go. If we see there are multiple legs to this ignition switch. This one down here is that purple one to the Sentry module we were looking at. This one here for run start goes to the Sentry module as well as the splice up to the TIPM. So since we didn't have an issue with the TIPM, we didn't have any codes pertaining to that, I think we could probably ignore this side of things. As well, we could ignore the power feed side to the ignition switch for now, because we weren't seeing anything else that you would expect to see if that were the issue. So we could potentially have an issue with this leg right here. So if we go back, vehicle diagrams, non-OE, and where are we? Starting. Okay, so if we go back to here, yeah, theoretically we could have an issue with this wire, but again, sometimes it was starting, and you know what, to have that sort of sometimes start, sometimes not start, and even still, if we had an issue with this wire here, we wouldn't have a code for the Sentry. So also likewise, we didn't have any communication codes, so pretty unlikely for an issue with the CAN wires. But you know what, if it came to that, then we could check that too. But really all we'd be checking is this wire right here. That at least that would be the most likely scenario, most likely to be a chance of success. So we would just pull the column covers off, or the knee bolster, to gain access to this. We would just kind of probe. Hopefully it's in an accessible spot, because we'd like to see this wire right here, right at the Sentry module, just to make sure it is actually getting the ignition switch signal. As well, we'd want to check the powers and the grounds on this, but you know what, it's kind of coming and going, so unlikely for it to be that. But you know what, again, if it wasn't a key, these are things that we could do. But all of that requires gaining access to things, which sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's not. But yeah, basically these would be the players. You'd have the ignition switch, you'd have the Sentry module, you'd have the TIPM. But of course in our case it was just a matter of a key. And you know what, like I said, with trying to gain access to these things, if you didn't have a spare key, it would still be worth it to get another key made, just because, you know, some of the stuff's pretty hard to get to, and it's useful to have another key. Whereas if you spend an hour or so just chasing down wires, you know, the customer's not really much further ahead. But anyways, this is the sort of thing that I do when I'm kind of looking to try and guess or try and figure out what's my next best method forward. I will look at the wiring diagram, figure out what I think is most likely versus what's the easiest to get to. And sometimes just a matter of plugging forward, sometimes you get lucky. But yeah, you just keep on going. You try to keep an evidence-based approach. You try not to kind of jump from thing to thing to thing to thing to thing to thing. But anyways, this one here was just the key, and we will carry on. Hopefully this helped someone's out, and thanks for watching. See you next time.